All right, so without further ado, executive functioning. Oh, sorry, you can visit our Padlet. There's the link. Under the executive functioning tab, you'll see all my stuff. If you have questions, you can write me in the chat, but today's PowerPoint's in there. There's a bunch of different discrete data collection tools in there. There's, when we talk about it later, there's a survey for figuring out which domain your student demonstrates deficits in. That's all on the Padlet. Yeah, I can put that link in the chat. Let me do that for us. Sorry about that. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. Oh, thanks, Tara. Everyone's looking out for me today. But yes. So visit the Padlet. There it is. Thank you, Tara. So what are executive functionings and how they affect our students? Oh, before we get started here, I kind of wanted to get a little snapshot about you guys and what your roles are, but of course it's not letting me. So if you guys could just put in the chat maybe what your role at a school is. If you're a teacher, if you're a school psych, that would be helpful to me. I had a poll, but apparently it's not working for me. I'll just follow this waterfall of sweet. Sweet. So it seems like mostly teachers, some administrators. Okay, so I assume most of you guys are at least somewhat familiar with the executive functioning. It can be kind of confused, the executive functioning, and I'll just be honest about my knowledge. I'm an ed specialist, so I'm as a teacher. And I didn't have a real great wealth of knowledge about what executive functioning was. I knew I had students who had deficits in executive functioning. I didn't know how a school psych would make a determination of whether that student's executive functioning deficits rise to the level of special education or just needed some accommodations. I didn't know what those assessments looked like. And so that's sort of been a journey for me personally to sort of figure that out. And I hope today to sort of help you understand that if you're a teacher, what some of those things look like, and also how to write a goal around that. To give you guys a little bit of background about what the executive functioning are, is that executive functioning, oftentimes we see it as sort of like this term that it's like the control tower, or it's the director of a student's mind to help them like manage themselves and their resources to achieve the goal. So basically they can plan, organize, see the goal, inhibit themselves, initiate all the things they need to do to reach the goal is sort of their executive functioning. And we're going to watch this little video, which I find, and sorry, let's stop the share. And hi, everybody. And I'm going to do a different share so we can watch this little video. So just sort of give you a background about what executive functioning is.
Science tells us that minds are built, not born. And at the center of this dynamic architecture are a set of skills called executive function and self-regulation.
Children's self-regulation and executive function are key ingredients in their lifetime performance. It's not just about learning language or learning numbers or learning colors. We have to be able to work effectively with others, with distractions, with multiple demands. These actually are skills that contribute to the productivity of the American workforce.
Just look at your shapes. What should you have done next?
Educators, I think, are looking for just this sort of thing. And when we describe what we mean by executive function, they say, yes, that's it. That's exactly, the problem. These kids, they can tell me these rules, but they can't actually use them.
What's this? A toolbox.
A toolbox.
What is executive function?
The thing
Probably the best way to think about it is sort of like an air traffic control system in the brain. Just like an air traffic control system has to manage lots of airplanes going on lots of runways and really exquisite timing and so on. A child has to manage a lot of information and avoid distractions. We really think of it as involving working memory and inhibitory control and mental flexibility. Take a situation where a child is having to take turns. So first of all, the child has to have inhibitory control. The child has to be able to stop whatever he or she is doing and let the other child take a turn. But when it's your turn again, you also have to remember what it is you're supposed to be doing. So that pulls on working memory. If the children who are taking the turns after you do something unpredictable, you have to be able to adjust what you're going to do next. And that requires mental flexibility. Children who are struggling with these capacities often look like children who just aren't paying attention, or children who are deliberately not controlling themselves.
If you don't have self-regulation, you act out and the teacher puts you in timeout, and so then you miss part of the learning that's going on, and then you are more upset because you're behind, and so you act out, and so you get this downward spiral.
How does executive function develop?
7 and plus 4.
In little children, and even in the infant and toddler years, you begin to see the roots of executive functioning skills. What's going on in our brains is unbelievably intricate and complicated.
The prefrontal cortex, or the front third of the brain, is important for executive function. But it's more than just prefrontal cortex. This region doesn't act alone. It's involved in controlling your behavior through its interactions with all other parts of the brain. The brain goes from a situation where you've got nearest neurons communicating very strongly with each other and ignoring the rest of the brain, to these widespread networks that are connecting these different areas. Executive function changes over the life course. It improves radically over the first few years.
I got a match prime.
It continues to improve throughout adolescence. It's not until early adulthood that you have the adult type networks that are very strongly activated that connect different brain regions together.
Let's take notes.
Also, we believe that executive functions can be trained.
It's just like going to the gym. So the more you practice in these areas, the stronger the capacity is likely to become, because you're helping to strengthen those neural connections.
You're at 24.
Slowly but surely, you're going to be able to step back, and that child's going to go into the world with these skills where they can get along with other people, change rules, and they can be flexible, and they can accomplish new things, and they're unafraid.
I got bit by my dog in my arm. Oh dear.
If we don't learn these skills during the childhood and adolescent years when they're coming online, we are really ill-equipped as an adult to hold a job, to maintain a marriage, to raise children, to get along with each other, to basically be part of a civil society.
You're okay.
All right, stop that. So that's a sort of an overview of what executive functioning is. Oftentimes we see that executive functioning has these different domains, and this can be pictured differently from different sources. Anything? Oh yeah, thanks. And that's a great video to share with families too, who often have trouble understanding executive functioning. It's through, and I'm not sure if it's in the Padlet. I think it is though. So these are the different sort of executive functioning domains. Inhibition, right? Your ability to inhibit yourself. Shifting, your cognitive flexibility to be able to shift from one thing to the next. Emotional control, emotional regulation. And again, we're thinking about whether the emotional control or regulation is age appropriate for that student. Task initiation, right? How, the teacher says, okay, it's time to go. Do they initiate to the task? Their working memory, and that's a big one, and it can have certainly a significant academic impact, how they can recall information. Planning and organization, like, plan, organize, think through. Task monitoring, do they sort of like, can they monitor their behavior, self-monitoring? Sorry, task monitoring and self-monitoring, so that they monitor their own behavior. So this is sort of executive functioning domains. They're all sort of going to be important when we talk about like sort of goal writing. Yeah, and Natalie has shared, Natalie Corona, who's in here, who hasn't heckled me too much so far, who's one of my colleagues who's a school psych. Natalie and I do an executive functioning training together. That's sort of like an overview for teachers, like what executive functioning is, what sort of assessments tools you look like, what, how it, sort of the manifestation, assessment tools, and then academic interventions. And I would be remiss in this goal writing symposium to not give some academic stuff. So there is some stuff like sprinkled here and there along with the goals. But Natalie put in the Padlet in the chat our Padlet for our training. So I would also recommend you check that one out as well. So, and this is something that Natalie, I've stolen from our training, that the executive functioning domain sort of breaks down into foundational skills and then advanced skills. So the real key foundational skills of executive functioning, right, is your inhibition, your ability to inhibit your reactions. So the students who have deficits in their inhibitory control are the ones who are constantly blurting out, they immediately are going to react. So they just have, a challenge inhibiting their behavior. Their working memory, their emotional control, their shifting and cognitive flexibility, sustain attention, can they sustain, and then their task initiation. So those are the foundational skills. And then sort of more advanced skills like planning, organizing, time management, that goal-directed persistence, and self-monitoring. All right, so a few just like key takeaways about executive functioning. It's neurological that need to be stimulated for the growth. This is something that develops over time as a student grows till they're 25 and beyond. And then executive functioning is learned with day-to-day real life problems. We get asked frequently in our training, what executive functioning kit is going to be the one, or where is this in our curriculum? You're like, well, you sort of have to direct it. It's sort of through teacher talk, or I'll talk about some strategies for how to embed executive functioning skills in your program to meet goals. It's developed by modeling supported practices. And, I think that accommodations, but also goals, writing actual goals around executive functioning skills will support students. And the big takeaway here is that executive functioning skills need to be taught. They are not spontaneously acquired. So students need to see executive functioning skills in action, need to be taught how to set goals, how to, self-monitor, all those sort of things, like how to de-escalate themselves when they're dysregulated. They need to be taught those skills. So it's our job as teachers to see oh, this student is really struggling with figuring out how to, get themselves back after they had an emotional outburst. It's our job to maybe think about the baseline for how often it's happening, and then maybe write a goal to help them sort of improve that outcome. So just in terms of academics and teaching an executive functioning skill, I think the thing is that you want to identify where the problem area is happening. And we'll talk a little bit about where to survey for which domain your student is having a specific challenge with. Set a goal, and that's what we're talking about today. It's the goal writing symposium. What's your goal going to be that's around that executive functioning area? And we'll talk later about how to finagle that. Don't worry. Involve the student in setting the goal. I think that's really important. Set, interim goals, which is what we do when we're setting IEP goals, or even just accommodation goals. Outline the steps the student needs to reach the goals. Make a checklist for them. Supervise them, and then fade your supervision, right? So we're teaching them, we're setting our goals together. It could be an IEP goal. It could be just, a goal for this one class. And then sort of teach them what they're going to do, give them a checklist, something like that to follow what the guidelines are. And then, take data on how it's going, and then try and fade your supervision there. So that's sort of how to, someone asking me a question, or they just are not on mute. executive functioning or deficits in executive functioning is going to have a pretty big impact on a student and their performance at a school. There's obviously going to be academic impact. They're going to have difficulty with their self-monitoring, revising and editing. Oftentimes we think of writing as being one of the harder tasks for students with executive functioning deficits, right? Because it hits on all those domains. You have to plan, you have to initiate, you have to organize yourself, you have to self-monitor and edit yourself. You have to do all these sort of things. And so students with executive functioning challenges, oftentimes writing is impacted. But all academic areas can be impacted. Obviously reading and math too, right? You look at the impact on math, right? Shifting between operations, their careless errors, in fluency, they may skip, in reading fluency, they may skip things. They may have trouble with comprehension. And then obviously there's going to be social impact, and there's going to be behavioral impact, and there's going to be organizational impact. And I think that just when we're thinking about IEP goals, any area where the executive functioning deficit is impacting them in the school site, we can think about it and try and write a goal for it. And I think that that's something to do. I think it needs to be rigorous, but oftentimes the executive functioning deficit gets in the way of the academic progress. And so it's important to write a goal in that area. Obviously, I think oftentimes our goals are academic or, and I think that we should see that the executive functioning component is tied into the academic output. And so just like sort of bringing those two together to increase your students' sort of production or quality at school. So that's that. Now, I think oftentimes when we think about executive functioning deficits, we think about students with, ADHD or ASD, but really, this can be students who qualify for special education, who don't qualify for special education, who are gifted. There's a whole host of students and adults that have executive functioning challenges and deficits. We all have our strengths and weaknesses when it comes to executive functioning. So this will executive functioning deficits will manifest in a whole host of special education categories, but also for all of us. I think if when we surveyed all of us, we would recognize, oh yeah, I'm not really that flexible. My thinking is not that flexible, or I'm really bad at organizing myself or planning things out, whatever it is. So this can, executive functioning challenges will manifest in many different ways across all of our students. So it's important to know that. Then we're just talking about a little bit of assessing for executive functioning formally. So oftentimes, I work at the Diagnostic Center, so we do formal assessments of executive functioning skills. And there's a whole host of different executive functioning batteries assessments. There's the brief, there's, what do we got, NEPSI, there's the CAS, where you would give a student a bunch of different formal assessments, get a standard score, sort of see which domain they demonstrate deficits, and sort of go from there. That's great. I think oftentimes what happens, and I think what can be hard for teachers, is that you see a student struggling oftentimes with sustained attention or all these areas in a classroom that don't often manifest in a testing setting, in a one-on-one testing setting. And that's because there are some limitations to testing, and I'll talk about that in a couple slides, but these are just some sort of formal assessments that we would, like a school psych would give to get at executive functioning skills. It could be rating scales that the teachers have filled out, or we have filled out a bunch of times, like the brief, or actual assessments. This is one that at the DCN we go to all the time, which is the animal sort on the NEPSI. And on this assessment, the question is, you lay the cards on the table and you're like, here you go. How many groups of 4 can you find using these 8 cards? That's the only instructions you give. And then you kind of twiddle your thumbs and see what the student does. And you get a lot of information from that, like, can they initiate, right? Can the student just take your instruction and go? Can they plan? Can they sort? All these sort of things. Are they flexible in how they think? You get all this information from this one task. And oftentimes at the DCN, we're fighting each other for time and elbowing each other out of the way. And this is an assessment that you can get a lot of information from quickly in terms of a student's executive functioning challenges. And like I was saying, though, there's sometimes a disconnect between what happens in the psych closet or at the diagnostic center between what we see in the classroom, right? And it's because like when we're giving a formal assessment, like I'm there cueing the child, like, hey, it's time to get going. I mean, on that assessment, I'm just laying the cards on the table, but like oftentimes it's pretty clear, like we're in a like little room that's got white walls and it's just me and my big beard and like in a testing kit, and the student is going to perform. You know, they may sustain their attention longer than they would if they're in class with a bunch of distractions, right? I'm there. They know that they're under the gun of like somebody's watching me one-on-one. And so that's where it can be kind of difficult to see that there's a difference between what was found in the testing room versus what this teacher sees in the classroom. And I think it's really important to do the behavioral observation and to do discrete data and to have data to back up your claim about what how your student is behaving or what executive functioning area the student is struggling with in the classroom, because sometimes it won't show in a testing setting just because of how it's set up. So that leads me into like discrete data collection, which is where you want to have a baseline for how your student is functioning in their executive functioning skills, so you can write a goal. So there's a bunch of different, basically, oh, sorry, someone's just, you know, hi. There's a bunch of different ways to get data on your students and what you want to look for. This could be, a chart like this. It could be a scatter plot, however you want to do it. And also, Tiffany, I've been trying to get you into this training for like the whole time. I don't know what's going on with your thing. I'm sorry. I don't know. I keep admitting you and it doesn't work wherever you are. But anyway, I digress. But again, when you're thinking about getting data, discrete data on an executive function area, right? Attendance, homework completion, how much they're handing in their homework or their assignments, how are they doing on their tests and quizzes, things like that. How are they participating? How often are they being sent out of class? How much time are they missing in class? Things like that. But also you want to think about, how often they're calling out, right? How inhibited are they? Are they calling out like every minute or every 5 minutes? If you have clear data on that, it's easier to write a baseline and then a better goal, right? Like, what about their working memory? How often are they bringing their stuff that they need to class, right? Or returning the things to school, or their emotional control? How often are they melting down? How severe is the meltdown? How long is the meltdown lasting? So having data on that, I know, and that can be a challenge. Like, let's say you're in high school or a middle school teacher, right? And you have all these students, and then the student transitions to the next class. How are you guys going to work together as a team to collect the data, analyze the data? Yeah.
The one thing I noticed that's not in here, when I do my observations, my best ones have been when I do it in the gen ed classroom, in my classroom, and on the playground, or when they're out, so I can get a real view of what the antecedent really is.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think the longer you can observe the student and the more you observe them, not only in structured time, but also on unstructured time, so you can see where what the antecedent to the behavior is, and then you can write a goal around that.
It would drive me crazy when a psych would come in and do a 10-minute observation and think they know, because it depends on the setting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that I tried to preference that oftentimes there's a disconnect, right? But again, I'm between like what can be found in a testing setting versus
Right.
what you see in the classroom. And the important part is to have your data and to take a baseline. Someone's asking me, can you expand on how we should be writing this baseline data? And I'll show you in a second. Like if the student is calling out, I would take a chunk of time, like let's say 20 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. And I think this is one thing that Tara will hit on tomorrow as well. And then how many times they're calling out or disrupting in that chunk of time. So that way you're saying like, you know, John is, you know, and in a 20-minute period, John is, you know, calling out 5 times, you know, or whatever it is, or a period, or per period. It depends on how often it is happening. It could be per day, it could be per hour, it could be, you know, per 20 minutes. Just depends on how severe the actual behavior or action is.
And how is it best to do that discreetly? Because I know at a site that I was at before, because I'm a new teacher, admin would always say to write it on the desk. I didn't like that because I kind of felt like you're calling them out on that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think
what are your takes on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? Because I mean, you want to be, it could be something where you just have a tally chart and you're just putting a tally on it, and you just have it, you know, somewhere, and like you make note of it, that it's happening. That can be hard. I mean, you could just, I mean, you could also, I mean, I think that that's maybe the best way. You may want someone to support you in that way. I think Tara may address that as well tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I do think, and it's laborious, and it's not super discreet. I agree, but to just like sort of tally up how often it's happening.
Daniel.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ways to tell teachers to help them gather data was to put a piece of masking tape on their sleeve or their pant leg, and then carry around a little Sharpie or a marker. And every time you see it, you just make a mark on your arm or your leg or wherever the tape is. And then at the end of the day or the end of the section, you can rip it off, write it down, start all over again. No one will know the wiser.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, masking tape, tattoo, you know, no, but I think that, would that be cleaned data though?
I would say keep it into, yeah, switching paper clips to keeping it, and Tara could probably add in a little bit more with this, but a short chunk of time or a specific section of the day. So like if you're really struggling with math, for example, because it's a non-preferred activity and you want to know how long they are attending for, or how many interruptions or how many call outs are happening, that's a good way to do it. And if you do it multiple times throughout the week or throughout the month around different times, you can kind of get a good idea of what their baseline is and get an average.
And can I jump in? This is Tara. I can jump in for a second. And we are going to be, I will be talking about this to some degree tomorrow, but really thinking too, when you're collecting data, one, Natalie, absolutely don't try to collect it ever all day or for long durations of time. So just get samples of data, and then you say that it's of observed opportunities or during time sample. But also when you're looking at a goal like attending, that's not actually something that you can observe. So thinking about what is an indication or what's the outcome that is attending that you can track more specifically. I just read something last night that was saying, don't track attending, track completion of a task, or track, you know, how many words are written, or something where you can really like judge that that the content is being acquired. Because attending, we don't actually know what someone's thinking. You know, Daniel's looking at me right now, but he might be thinking about, you know,
the catch is doing backflips.
Totally. So also I think that's really helpful when you're thinking about how do we collect data, and it's clean if you have a very discrete skill that you're tracking, and then your paper clips or your marking on masking tape is clean because you know exactly what you're tracking.
Thanks. And also great questions. And I think that it's going to be a richer training if you guys ask your questions. So please don't be afraid to ask. And thanks, Tara and Natalie and April, for the questions. Yeah, just some other, you know, like I said before, like, again, and I think like Tara said, you want something that's tangible, right? So the time it takes, but, you know, between students, you know, the students say they'll start something before they actually do. So you can actually time that, and just like, you know, make a note of it somewhere. How long something, you know, they say they're going to, you know, spend 20 minutes doing it. Like how long did it actually take them to do it? And then, you know, the number of times the behavior occurs. It could be positive, you know, they turned in their homework, or, problem behaviors. How often did they melt down or whatever it was, or count the number of times you had to prompt them. If one of the ways you're trying to support them is like they're prompt dependent to initiate, and you want to sort of, write a goal around how prompt dependent they are, how many times you have to remind them to initiate to a task. So all those are things that you can take discrete data on. Anyone have any questions about discrete data? There's a couple other things I'll talk about a little bit, but yeah, like I said, executive functioning can manifest in a ton of different ways, like at a school setting. If they're inhibited, like they may like use words, the things, they may like, call out whatever it is, initiation, beginning assignments, things you want them to do is raise their hand to participate in a lesson as opposed to or get started on a lesson. How they can adjust to schedule changes, or stop before a task is done, to think through a task, to sort of perspective take also. When they're emotionally regulated, we want them to like sort of ask for help, sort of accept their consequences, sort of talk themselves down, having the materials they needed for their working memory. Are they able to do basic math calculation, reading comp, sort of get their homework turned in. Organization could be like their organization of their desk, or planning a long-term project, but also like organizing their thoughts. And then also like, can they finish assignments through, stay on task, make a goal, and actually set it and actually meet it, excuse me. And this is one thing that Natalie talks about in our training, which is sort of just reframing some of the challenging behaviors that can come along with executive functioning deficits, which is like to always focus. And I think this is one of the takeaways for me from the training, to go back to the executive functioning domains, like when we're writing goals, and also when we're thinking about behavior. So like, as opposed to like unmotivated, like they have deficits in their task initiation, or, they're disruptive, like, they have deficits or need support in their inhibition. They're as opposed to like messy, whatever it is, they have trouble with their organization or whatever. They're forgetful, they have, deficits, or their organization or whatever, flexibility or working memory, whatever area that we sort of see, you can go back to the executive functioning domain, as opposed to sort of the other terms. It's sort of a more holistic approach, but also I think it focuses us and can sort of help us when we're writing our goals, because I always, or at least it's important to name what executive functioning area, at least for me, what functioning area you want to write the goal around in the goal. So that certainly can be helpful. And this is a checklist. If you wanted to, it's on the Padlet. If you wanted to see which executive functioning domain your student, if you take a focal student and sort of like go through the checklist, which domain they're sort of exhibiting deficits in, you can do the checklist. There's one for K2 or the pre-K. There's one for K2, 3, 5, and then there's just a middle school one. So if you're a high school teacher, I would just give the middle school one and see where you're at there. They're sort of in the Padlet. All the different checklists are there. This is from Smart But Scattered from Peg Dawson. So that's worth checking out too if you want some data, not only around the students, just in terms of what domain they may need support in, and then you can sort of write a goal tailored in that domain. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about goals. And so I think that's sort of my background on executive functioning. And then when we're talking about goals throughout all of our trainings, right, we're talking about SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And we want to make sure we check our checklist when we write the goals, our executive functioning goals, or any goal. And so we will be doing that. And I'll be going through a bunch of case studies and thinking about students and then writing executive functioning goals for them. So like I said before, I think it's important when we're talking about executive functioning goals to explicitly talk about which specific executive functioning skill or domain we're hitting on, and then what behavior the student, how you want to meet that, or address that executive functioning deficit or behavior. So which area, which domain, and then how are we going to do it? So always going back to that. So just some examples of that, right? The student demonstrates, I'm just going to go from the bottom here, right? If they demonstrate inhibition challenges, right? they're going to use acceptable language and behavior to handle the conflict situation, right? If they have emotional control deficits, right, they're going to meet the goal by using coping strategies to recover when they're anxious. If they have trouble with initiation, they're going to start working at a certain amount of time. And again, we're going to work to make it a SMART goal, so we're going to make it measurable and all that sort of stuff. But we're going to name the executive functioning area and then talk about how they're going to do it, right? Again, if they have trouble planning or prioritizing, right, they're going to create and follow like an actual homework plan or study plan. So that's sort of like how I think of it, is like I want to name, and you'll see when I write the actual goals that I always try and name which area it is. Just so it's clear that it's tied to an executive functioning domain. And then this is how they're going to meet. They're going to have how their behavior is going to be met. So this is the challenge. There are no executive functioning or standards, right? So how do we make these goals tied to the California state standards? And how do we write a legally defensible executive functioning goal? So there's sort of, two options. One is to check one of the boxes on your IEP forms. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then the second way is to find grade level standards that are related to an executive functioning area that you're targeting, and sort of use the language in the California content standards to mirror the language of these executive functioning domains. And so there's sort of two ways to get at this. When we're talking about number one, just check in with your districts. I know that, especially since we're in the age of Andrew F., which is where, IEP goals need to be rigorous. And I think sometimes that can be conflated to they need to be like on grade level or things like that. Just check in with your district to make sure that what you're doing is okay. And that, your program specialist knows that this is this one way to get at this, to write these goals. Because this is what you would just do, on your IEP forms, like this is the SACE form. It has these different ways. Enable students to be involved in progress in general education state standard. Yeah, you want to definitely check that, right? Because we're trying to work towards that. Addresses other educational needs resulting from the disability. That's the one you really need to check. Because if the student's disability, whatever it is, in their executive functioning is impacting their academics, they're having adverse educational impact, and it's because of their executive functioning deficits, that's what you're going to want to check. And so it's okay to work on executive functioning goal if you check that second box. The student also has IEP goals that are tied directly, and if the student also has IEP goals that are tied directly to the grade level standards. So I'm sure there's going to be questions about that. What does the baseline look like for these deficits? Can you give one example of appropriate baseline? I think you mean like how often, let me know if I'm interpreting this correctly. How often is it happening where it's impacting their academics? I think that's sort of where it is. I'm like, if the baseline is it's happening every day, and I'll show you when I go to the case studies, how often this is happening is sort of like how you would do the baseline. But again, like if you're trying to determine whether a student's baseline necessitates an IEP, that's something different, but just like an overall baseline of what it would look like, I'll show you in the case study. So without further ado, here is a case study for Ashton. So when Ashton participates in group lessons or wants to take care of personal needs, he blurts out and interrupts instruction. As a result, his comments are often ignored. He provided with constant corrective feedback. This often results in escalated behaviors. Then he, inappropriate comments, and then his motivation is down. He attends less to the lessons and participates less in class, and certainly misses instructional minutes. So here, and for the person was asking, here's the baseline. So the executive functioning skill that we need to work on is inhibition. So Ashton raises his hands and waits to be called on during whole class period with 30% accuracy over a 1 week period. So in this case, I was just monitoring for a 1 week period. And my goal is going to be over that 1 week period. So then my goal for Ashton in terms of his inhibitory control is by 12/5/2021 during a whole class lesson, Ashton will demonstrate, and again, here's where I name what we're getting at, inhibitory control by raising his hands and waiting to be called on before speaking with 80% accuracy and 4 to 5 opportunities over a 1 week period as measured by teacher charter data and observation. So again, there's me naming the executive function area. Well, we'll see. Is it a SMART goal? I think that's the thing we're talking about, right? So is it specific, right? Ashton will raise his hand and wait to be called on before speaking. Is it measurable? 80% accuracy and 4 to 5 opportunities over a 1 week period. 80% accuracy and 4 to 5. It's a little confusing, but yeah, I think I could have done a better job making that clear. Is it attainable, right? The baseline is that he raises his hand with 30% accuracy currently. Is it relevant? Certainly Ashton is missing instructional minutes because of his lack of inhibitory control, and it's impacting his overall academic function. He can't attend to the reading, writing, and math because he's out of class, or he's trying to get out of class and he's getting out of class. He's blowing it up when he's trying to get out of class. So, and is it time specific? Yeah, by the end of the year or by December, we want to set the goal. Now, how do we reach a goal like that? That can be certainly hard. And oftentimes students with inhibitory challenges, it can be hard to support them. I'm just going to give you guys one thing that you guys can do in distance learning, just because I like it. And oftentimes when we talk about supporting students with executive functioning deficits, visuals are usually the main go-to, like giving them a visual cue to like stop, think about what they're doing, whatever it is. So I'm going to, sorry, I'm going to stop the share really quick, and I'm going to show you guys, hello everybody. This is classroom screen. Again, I was thinking distance learning, but now everyone's like gearing up to go back to school, but you could still use it, whatever it is. So all classroom screen is you can embed it in your Google Classroom, whatever it is. Oftentimes students, especially students like Ashton who have inhibitory control deficits, they need a visual cue for like, when is it time to go? When is it time to stop? When is it time to raise my hand? And oftentimes us as teachers have to just constantly do it for them. Like, no, or whatever it is. But this is kind of nice because it has like a red light, green light. Okay, it's time to go. No, you cannot ask me to go to the bathroom now. And then also I like, this like, if I'll set it for 10 seconds, the timer function here like has a visual cue. It goes from, green to red. It's just a nice sort of visual interface to help you, and it has an auditory cue to help your students, especially students with executive functioning deficits who like don't understand how time passes, who just like don't get that. You're like, oh, you have to wait a minute. They're like, is it up? You're like, no, a minute is a minute, is it up? So like, again, showing them visually how time elapses, giving them a red light, green light, things like that. And oftentimes like, when I'm doing recommendations for inhibitory control, or like students who have deficits in their inhibition, it could be just like a piece of paper that just says you gotta wait or whatever it is to support, or even like a red light, green light, and you can just, or like that's laminated and you can just like touch it as opposed to like having to like stop and address them, can be something that's helpful. Is saying student does something 0% of the time appropriate? We were recently told to put that by an advocate, but we have been trained to write what a student can do in the baseline. I'm going to ask Tara also to jump in here, but I'm a little confused by the question. I mean, I think if they can't do it, then they can't do it. I don't like 0% of the time. Like, are they never doing it? Then that would be accurate, right? But then we've been trained to write what the student can do in the baseline. If the behavior is, if they're never doing it, that's 0% of the time. That's my take on it. Tara, if you have a different opinion, I would love to hear from you. if she's awake. But yeah, I would be honest. Yeah, that's my, Michelle, I agree. I would be honest. If they can't do it, they can't do it. I wouldn't, because the advocate is saying, you know, that to put 0%. I mean, if it's honest, if they can't do it ever, that's 0% of the time. And then you're building from that. Because
So
some,
I'll just unmute because it's kind of silly that I keep typing
yeah,
this.
just
Sorry.
talk to me. It's better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm an old school special ed teacher, and
Yeah.
I've been trained that our baselines are supposed to be what a student can do. So if it's 0%, I don't understand how we're even a 30%. We've been told we're supposed to write what they can do and then build from there. But it seems like maybe things have changed. So, and I'm at the high school level, although this student is like a functional skills kid. So it's low level. But have you guys changed that? So the baseline doesn't need to be what they can do in a positive way anymore. It can be, you know, like can complete 20% of their assignments. Is that an appropriate?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't tailor it to like who your audience is. I would tailor it to what's accurate. You know, if that's what the data you have that they can do it 20% of the time, that's what the baseline is my personal take on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, again, and then I think from there, and Michelle's writing, like she's saying you also be able to measure their achievement from their baseline. Yeah, I mean, I think that when you're talking about an executive functioning area, sometimes they don't ever do it, right? Sometimes every time they blow their lid, they don't, you know, or whatever happens, it may be that it happens very infrequently or never, or you don't ever see it. And I think you should just be honest about that. I think that, and again, I sort of slightly address this, but like, yeah, I mean, again, I think you just be honest. Barbara's saying maybe you said 10% of the time with some kind of prompting. I think you got to be honest. Like they can do it 20% of the time with prompting, right? Like that's what's happening. But like they're needing prompting to do it. Like they would do it 0% of the time independently. And I think that you know, you can flesh those two things out, that they're doing it independently 0% of the time, 20% of the time with prompting, or whatever it is. I mean, I think that what's happening is that like, I think everyone's sort of responding to trying to figure out how to navigate in the like Andrew F. rigorous goal world is what tell me if I'm wrong.
This is actually another thing that I'm wondering about, especially with executive skills, because it is a developmental process. So if a student is not able to do something at all, right? At all, never, ever, it makes me wonder if they're just not there developmentally yet. So that goal might inherently be too difficult. And then you have to take a couple steps back and write a goal that is more appropriate to where the student is functioning. So that might be something else to think about, especially with those advanced executive skills, where there are kids that are leaving high school and going into college where those advanced skills are not set yet. And the expectation for those to be set may not be realistic if those foundational skills have not been honed in and established. So that's another thing to remember too. If you're writing a goal and a student is not able to do it any % of the time at all, then you might have to rethink that goal.
Thanks, Natalie. I think that's a great point. Is that like, yeah, if the baseline is 0%, rethinking what thinking about what your goal is that you're working towards. But it may honestly be like where the student's functioning.
Can I say one thing, Daniel, real quick?
In there, Joey.
I think, hi guys, this is Joey Chapman from the Diagnostic Center. I think that the advocates, one of their points maybe by saying that was you want to try to have it more of a positive note. So saying something 0% of the time might come across as negative. There's no hard and fast rule of what percentage you have to say. But like Daniel said, the purpose is to be as honest as possible. So when you're working with the child, you know how much progress they have or haven't made. But what you said, Daniel, that I really like is, and someone else in the chat said, if you even say just a low percentage number, but with prompting, that allows you to see what they are able to do, even if it's super low, but seeing that they need prompting or support and able to get there.
All right, I'm going to move on here to our next case study, which is Liam. So when Liam is playing at recess, he often disagrees with his peers, which results in him hitting or screaming or kicking his peers. Because of that, he's often sent to the office or away for disciplinary, referrals or suspension, and often causes him to miss instructional minutes. Then he falls behind, he misses instructions and directions. He's unable to get himself back on track so he can be available for learning. Sounds familiar, I can imagine. And so then you're going to want to write a goal around, anyone have a guess? What executive functioning area here? Yeah. So yeah, inhibition and emotional regulation. So a baseline, right? Liam uses previously taught strategies such as walking away, asking adult for help, or using an iMessage to solve problems on the playground, like in 1 of 5 opportunities. So that's sort of the baseline from when we've observed him, is his baseline. So then I write the goal, right? During a disagreement with peer on the playground, he's going to ask adult for help, take deep breaths, or play something else, or use an iMessage, right? So that's what we're going to do 50% of the time to respond to his problems over a 2-week period as measured by observations and teacher charted data. So again, we're working towards exactly what sort of thing we want him to do, the behavior we want him to do, right, is to, walk away, take the deep breaths, play something else, or use an iMessage. And then there's our measurables. And so is it a SMART goal, right? Is it specific, right? We're, during the disagreement, he's going to use the strategy. One of the strategies that we're going to give him is measurable, 50% of the time we want him to do it. Again, is it attainable? He's done it 1 out of 5, and we can work on teaching him how to use those strategies and talking through scenarios when he's emotionally dysregulated or whatever happens. However, we're going to do our social emotional learning. Is it relevant? He's missing a bunch of instructional minutes, and like he could be academically fine, but his emotional regulation is impacting his academics because he's not there to receive the instruction. And then is it in time? Yeah, by the end of December, or by the beginning of December, we want him to meet this goal. I'm going to give you guys a couple other sort of executive functioning supports, things like that. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Google Keep, which is just a Google extension. Whenever I do an executive functioning assessment and I'm looking for recommendations, and one of the big recommendations for students with executive functioning challenges just in general is a checklist. So they can a visual, again, we're talking about how visuals are really important for students with executive functioning deficits. So just a checklist that they can check off is a really important tool. And Google Keep is a really easy one to use. I'll just show it to you really quick just because that's the way I am. Because I'm a visual learner.
Thank you, because I've never used it.
Cool.
I've never seen it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, all Google Keep. Can you guys see it? It's got an orca. Yes, no, maybe so. Thumbs up, maybe. Yeah, okay, you guys can see it. Cool. So yeah, all Google Keep is you can create a checklist, and it's through the Chrome suite. So let's say it was Liam, right? And he's on the playground, and we're trying to teach him that, his goals are to, so Liam's, behavioral strategies. And again, first we can just teach him and show him. So basically all you do is you make you should check, take a deep breath, use an iMessage, whatever you want him to do. And again, this may not be the best for what he's doing because he's on the yard, but again, you can teach him this way so that he's got the checklist in his mind is what you want to sort of work towards. Walk away, whatever it is. And it could be behavioral, it could be academic. And, so it's okay, he can just literally check it off. And again, You can do it for behavioral, academics, organizational, whatever thing you need to make a checklist for, you can make it. If you have a group of students who all have the same sort of executive functioning stuff going on, or maybe your whole class, like maybe they need help with their organization or like breaking down an assignment into steps, you can create one of these and just send it out to all of them. And then they can check it off individually on their own. And you can check where they are on the checklist. So, and it's free. It's in the Chrome suite. So if you guys are using like Google Docs and all that sort of stuff, just using Google Keep. I mean, there's me like doing like with my assessments, like what I'm like writing off the things that they're going to be doing. And then, you know, whatever it is, like it's all there. You know, my cool down list, did I take a breath? I use iMessage. Again, teaching them first, like what you want them to do. And then you want them to sort of internalize it. Because as we said at the beginning, right, these executive functioning skills need to be taught. And one of the best ways is to use like a visual checklist. It's, you know, it helps them self-monitor, it helps them, you know, with their emotional regulation, you know, even initiation. It can help in all these different areas. And it can be also just like pictures. You can sort of like work it. So it's just pictures. If you have a student who like can't read or really struggles with reading, all those things can happen. So that is Google Keep.
Daniel, did you say we can share this, like this app with the students, like a Google
Yeah,
Doc?
so basically all you would do, so then what you would do is that you see here, you would just say whatever, you would just put their email in there. Do you see that? So if it's your students, you could just punch your whole class list in there and they could just all have the same checklist. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple, it's kind of clean. When you have students who like are you know, like they can't make a plan, you have to make a plan with them or whatever it is. It's just a way initially to teach them like, hey, here's how you make a checklist. And then the goal is to have them make it, right? But this is just one way to start that. So that's that. Thanks for letting me do that. This one, okay. Maybe not this one, I'm off here. Yeah, there we are. And just some other like emotional supports just because we're here and why not. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the zones of regulation. That can be one where, you know, students sort of like recognizes within themselves like where they are along the path, you know, are they in the, you know, are they working towards the red zone, like, and then talking about, okay, so you're in the red zone, like how are you going to work your way back to the yellow zone? And again, like, so at least they're identifying when they're emotionally dysregulated or working, you know, or building up towards that. Again, there's like coaching or a bunch of different ways, even like talking through stories that you guys are reading aloud, how you know, how to embed the executive functioning stuff in there. Like a character persevered, a character, you know, was really angry, but then they made it through it, whatever it is, you know, talking about that, talking through it, you know, showing your students how to work through those things can support them in, you know, working towards their IEP goals around emotional regulation. And then the mindfulness stuff, again, we work for the state, or I work for the state. So in the age of like multi-tiered system of supports, which is a whole student approach, we're thinking about not just the academics, but also the social emotional learning. You should have a social emotional learning component embedded in your program. So whatever that is, you know, knowing that program, you know, if it's second step or, you know, whatever. Also like mindfulness activities. A lot of teachers are Kaiser members, and Kaiser offers the Calm app for free if you just go on their website, and you can just like download that application and then just bring those lessons into your program to help sort of like, you know, support your students, especially with their emotional regulation, and just like not to make sure that like their social emotional learning is not just something that you pull out like on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, but like is just embedded everywhere in your program. Will be best practices and will help your students meet their goals of learning how to use those iMessages, you know, walk away to, you know, whatever your goal is and whatever program you want to use for how to calm them and decrease their emotional dysregulation. All right, so that's plan A, to check the box and SACE. And now we're going to talk about plan B. Does anyone have any questions about that before we move on? Am I going too fast? What time is it? Oh yeah, we're definitely going to run out of time. All right, plan B. So plan B, and how to write an executive functioning goal. Yes, thank you, Natalie. So yeah, so the second part the second choice, if you're not going to do to check the box on your IEP forms, is to look at the verbs. And this comes from Kevin Schaefer, who is from West Ed, who works from Ed as well. And so in this document that he uses is on the Padlet in my section and also in Joey's section as well. And so basically, this is where it gets a little, all right. Is like you're going to use the verbs that are in the California content standards to sort of pin them to an executive functioning area. And they don't always like, there's not like, but it's close. And again, for an inhibition and emotional regulation, it may just be easier to use plan A, which is just check the box that it's, you know, part of their disability. Excuse me. But the other areas, the other domains you can kind of get at in the executive functioning areas. So initiation, there's a bunch of stuff around, you know, produce, understand and follow directions. Oftentimes it's in writing, but it's sort of initiating, right? So you can kind of use those standards to write an initiation goal, and I'll talk about that. Flexibility, there's often compare and contrast, right? Or distinguish a point of view, which is like perspective taking, right? So, but oftentimes in writing or in reading comprehension. But we want them to do it like interpersonally. But again, you can use that California content standard for writing or for reading and sort of tailor to sort of an interpersonal perspective taking. For working memory, right? They have to sequence, they have to use temporal words and signify event order. They have to like describe chronologically, those sort of things. Organize and planning, right? You need to organize your writing. You need to plan your writing. All those are going to be in the California content standards, most grade levels. Now, when you talk about organizing like your workspace, it's not necessarily organizing your writing, but it is the word organize. So like you can kind of, you know, juggle it up and put it in there. And then self-monitor, right? There's reflect and revise. Again, oftentimes it's around, you know, either writing or that sort of output, but you can sort of tailor that towards self-monitoring. You know, are reflecting on their behavior. Again, but it's sort of turning it to talking about their own actions as opposed to like reflecting on a character's actions. But I think that that's one way to do it. So Kevin Schaefer's document sort of integrates all these sort of executive functioning areas, and they're the ones in red. I was going to sort of show you guys, but I'm not sure I'm going to have time. But again, the executive functioning words we're looking for: recall, prior knowledge, organize, perseverance, resilience, prioritizing, self-regulation, evaluation. Those words are going to show up a lot in the California content standards. And so like you can kind of like hunt for them, but he's also sort of mapped it out. Like obviously no one's gonna be able to read this, it's too small, but like this is just looking at grade level standards, like elementary grade level standards. And if you look at his document, he's sort of taken in like, let's say 3rd grade, describe a character in a story and their traits, motivations, and feelings, and explains how their actions contribute to the sequence of events, right? So these are sort of the red words are sort of the executive functioning words. So you can go through it that way, just to see, you know, where you know, if you're looking for a specific domain, and you can sort of find the words that way to match your students' grade levels standards. Yeah, this is doesn't look very good. Again, so there's like distinguished point. This is like on a 3rd grade level standard. So again, sequence, cause and effect, logical connections, comparison, cause and effect, sequencing things. These are all sort of executive functioning sort of verbs that you can use to write a goal. And I'll sort of show you how to do that. So here is a little closer look. So like in 3rd grade, you know, distinguish their own point of view from that of the author of the text. So again, we're looking for a point of view, which is sort of an executive functioning skill, right? For flexibility shifting, right? Perspective taking. Can they sort of like transfer the point of view to another, which oftentimes students, especially students with ASD who have executive functioning challenges, have a hard time doing. And so we can write a goal for that. So here is Brian. So After Brian gets in a disagreement with his peers on the playground or in class, he's unable to understand the perspective of his peers and recognize how his own actions negatively impact the situation. So as a result, right, he doesn't, school discipline does not help change Brian's action in the future. He argues with adults, trying to reason with him. He misses additional class time because he's unavailable for learning for various amounts of time. So because he's unable to understand students' perspective or his peers' perspective, he gets in trouble and then he misses instructional minutes. So again, we can write a goal around his shifting. And again, you'll see that I'm using the 3rd grade standard, which is around taking a point of view. Again, it's taking a point of view in regards to a text, and we're sort of taking the point of review in terms of like interpersonal stuff. But again, it's linking the verbs to an executive functioning skill. And again, there's my baseline for Brian, right? He can identify the perspective of others after disagreement in 1 of 5 opportunities. And again, there's me when we go to my actual goal, naming what executive function domain we're getting at, right? Brian will demonstrate flexible thinking by identifying the perspective of others with 80% accuracy. And then is it a SMART goal, right? It's specific after having disagreement with his peers or teacher when completing a restorative justice activity with supportive adult. Given his three choices, he'll identify the perspective of others. Is it measurable? 80% accuracy over a 4-week period.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I've seen that goal before in our behavior bank.
Yeah.
So would that be considered executive functions or a behavior?
This one sort of hits on a little bit of both. And this whoops. Yeah, I think that, and this is where behavior and executive function can sometimes overlap. And so it can go sort of either way. And I think that oftentimes when you're looking for, and like what Nell was saying is that one part of executive functioning is your behavioral regulation or emotional regulation, right? So they're sort of just linked. And so like I think that sometimes when you're looking for, and I know that in the DCN trainings we've kind of like been like, oh, don't use your goal banks or whatever it is. We've sort of, and like there aren't a lot of executive functioning goals, but there are behavioral goals in there. And so if you're looking for one for executive function, if you want like how it's written, it's not a bad thing to look through.
But I also have a hard time measuring those goals because when it only says like a percentage or 3 out of 5, I just have a hard time measuring those goals.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that like, yeah, I mean, I think that in this case, in terms of measuring this goal, yeah, I mean, it can be more of a challenge. But I think that like when you're like, okay, every time that he's going to have a disagreement, we're going to give him the 3 choices, and then he's going to be able to identify which of those 3 choices is going to be. And then, that can be measurable. I think trying to simplify as much as you can there, but yeah, I understand why it could be a challenge.
Thank you.
Danielle, can I come in for a hot second?
Go ahead, Tara.
So I think too, like this is a really great goal. I might just add like from a choice, it says with 3 possible choices, he will, it doesn't actually say like he will select one of the 3 choices, which is also there. And so when you're going to track it, you create a very simple data sheet that's in the same place that every time this conflict comes up, someone goes over and marks, yep, he didn't, or no, he didn't. And then you have your data.
Okay, that works. Thank you.
Thank you,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Kind of common question. I had a child before, and there were behaviors if you asked him to work too many times because he had already produced the correct answers twice. So I talked to the parents and I said, I want to make the data measurable at twice a day across 2 consecutive weeks. Because if he knows he already answered, it was counting to 20. If he knows he got it right, it's almost like we're, enticing a behavior by asking him to do it a 3rd, 4th, and 5th time. I don't know if that, I mean, the parents agreed, the team agreed, but I don't know how appropriate it was.
You mean
I changed how,
wait, change because you're like you want them at that the goal was written like out of 4 outcomes,
3 out
and
of 5 or 4 out of
but
5.
like at the second one he was like, why am I counting to 20 again?
I've already got it 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would reevaluate the goal at that point. If he's getting it 100% at 2, you know, why go to 5? That would be my instinct. Tara, you're our data person. You can jump in here as well. Or sorry, Deanna, do you want to get in here? Go ahead. You raised your hand. You're on mute though.
That might be a good thing. No, hi.
Hi.
When we're measuring goals, especially at the high school level, it is very challenging. I think that finding what the school culture and climate is very conducive to see if the child fits within that range of functioning. In terms of measuring goals, I think observation, informal checklists. I love the tape measuring. There are also, correct me if I'm wrong here, Tara and Daniel, the BIPs. Are we entitled as resource teachers or as observers, administrators, whatever, to go into an environment and actually take one of those tests and use it as a scale to measure what we can do for, I mean, executive functioning is, my background's emotionally impaired. I mean, I have training in that with a psych hospital with kids. Thing of it is though, it's pretty synonymous, the two terms. I think a lot of it is with the EI students, we can't say there's something wrong with you. There's a mental health, we can't do that. So this might be a tangent that is more doable to say, okay, Johnny, you need to shift your behavior because we're seeing a little bit of inflexibility. Our high school kids understand that and they will work with us. And if it answered your question or not, what I wanted to ask you in a very clear, cohesive manner is we have a student running off into campus with no PPE and not following directions. They expect 100% perfection every single day, every single time. So where are we at? I mean, we have those two extremes, right? I don't know how to match that to make it work for the kids. Thanks. Did that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Say yes, Daniel. Yeah, it made
Yes.
live.
Yes.
It is. We have the same issues, you know, and our administrators, even our behaviorists will say, and thank you for letting me take this time. It's predominantly behavioral and even parents can't deal with it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So where are we as teachers, as professionals trained? I'm not going to come out and say, yeah, your son is, the kid knows it. But somehow we have to master this so that we don't, I don't know, using the, I don't know. I guess I get frustrated because I hear the same thing over and over and there's really not an answer to it, is what it is. That's what I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this particular student, you know, if there's been, I think a behavioral eval, because it seems like it's a behavioral thing. If there's an FBA done or something like that, so you can figure out what the function of the behavior is and go from there and make a plan. That would probably be the best way to address that. But yeah, I mean, and then write goals, you know, within their behavior, because obviously the behavior is impacting their ability to function in a school. And so the academics are gonna not be there, right? Because they can't, they're 0, right? So I would assume. So yeah, that's certainly a challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge. And then figuring out like, hey, how are you gonna write a behavior goal? How are you gonna get the students to just, you know, be there and be a part of it? I would recommend, I'm not the person for the DCN, but Tara is the behaviorist at the Diagnostic Center. So I would, you know, visit one of her trainings or ask her for a copy if you're interested in some strategies, things like that. and she's definitely the person to support you in you know, helping with his behavior, and I'm sure she'd be open to talking to you or responding to an email, or even we're doing trainings all the time, and you can join us or her at any point. And that's one thing I didn't mention at the beginning. If you want to join any of our trainings, just go on the DCN website and look at our training schedule and see, you know, there's a ton of behavioral trainings, which, you know, is very much in time with executive functioning. And just send an email. Here, I'll do it really quick. Sorry. Are you guys okay if I just show you guys really quickly? I don't know. I'm a visual learner. So, so yeah, if you go to the Diagnostic Center website, you guys can see it, I assume. If you go to our training calendar, and then where we are.
Right now is your PowerPoint.
Tara. Thank you.
I got you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyway, I'm at the Diagnostic Center website, and then if you go to our training calendar, I'm plugging you, Tara. So get ready. And then I guess we're in March. Yeah, there's a ton of trainings around creative. You know, so here we are, March. So we missed those ones, but anyway. Creating an effective behavior intervention plan, writing a plan. There's Tara on the 23rd. So you just email Sherilyn and just say, hey, I'm interested in going to this training, and they'll send you a Zoom link. You know, I'm doing a dyslexia guidelines one. There's, you know, treating trauma, social communication. There's a bunch. So yeah, just go on our website, find a training, or there's less than I thought, a training that looks interesting. But, you know, social emotional learning, there's a bunch of different around social emotional learning, around behavior. Things that will be support you. You know, internal learning disorders, Kristen does. There's a bunch. So yeah, just go on our website, email the people, and we would love to have you. And they'll be a better resource for you than this little, you know, than I'll be right now at the end of my executive functioning training. Yeah, I'm gonna where am I here? Yeah. So anyway, I was looking at. Nah, you probably are not looking at this anymore. Sorry, let me go back and go to this. And yeah, or Tara saying come to the Ask a Specialist live. That would be a great one to come to if you need help, because there's behavioral ones coming up soon.
Where's that? I'm sorry, now I'm blurting out.
Oh, no, you're good. So the Ask a Specialist, sorry, I'm going to go all the way back. So Ask a Specialist live happens on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 4. So there is behavior one is on Wednesday the 24th. So, and Tara will be running it. So Ask a Specialist, who is Tara and not me. And so come to that one and ask away. And then there's also, you know, there's a ton more. This is only through April, and we're doing it through the end of time. It seems like we'll be doing this Ask a Specialist on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So I'm sure if you sign up, they'll blast out when new topics come up, and I'm sure Tara will do another one on behavior, or has done another one on behavior. But let's come to that one. Anyway, I digress. Where was I here?
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I'm gonna look at one more. Sort of looking at the verbs here, which is like a 6th grade standard for writing informative explanatory text to examine a topic, convey ideas, concepts, and information through a selection, organization, and analysis of relevant content. Anyone have a guess which one we're going to use here for executive functioning one? Yeah, we're going to go for the organization one. Now, again, we're talking about organizing for content, and we're going to kind of like massage that into like actually organizing of materials. Maybe, sure. So here's Stacy. She's unable to keep her assessments and papers organized. She forgets her stuff. She can't find her notes in her classwork or assist in completing her independent homework task. As a result, she's not returning her stuff. Her grades are impacted. She's not able to study for her test because she doesn't have her stuff together, and she can't plan for long-term projects or assignments, right? So we're going to take that language of 6th grade organization and turn it into an organizational goal. Sure. So yeah, So, and again, here is me saying, Stacy uses an assignment log binder with tabs for each classroom and track organizes 0 out of 5 days a week. She doesn't ever do it, right? That's my baseline for her. She doesn't do it. That's the honest baseline. And if I have data for that, then that's my data. And again, so my goal is she's going to use her planner, a notebook with tabs for each class, and a homework folder to organize her assignments in 4 to 5 days a week over a 4-week period as measured by observation teacher chart data. We want her, and again, her organization is the key. Now, how are we going to get her to do that? We're going to get her to, color code her tabs, get her a folder, remind her, you whatever it is, you have her use a checklist, whatever she needs to do to make sure she's getting that stuff together. So we're taking that like writing organizational goal and we're making it actual, organizational goal, but it's a SMART goal. And I think it's what is happening is that her disorganization is impacting her academics and her function in school. And so we can write a goal around that. It's measurable in 4 to 5 days a week out of a 4-week period. It's attainable. She's not doing it now, but if we keep on it, we make a plan for teaching her how to do it. And again, she's unable to express her knowledge because she doesn't have, she's not bringing her work back. She doesn't have it, and she's not bringing it back. Someone has a question. So yeah, so that's sort of a goal. Again, you have to think about how you're going to meet that goal. And again, for students with executive functioning challenges, oftentimes, color coding sort of tabs, things like that, making sure they have a binder, planning it out, writing a goal for them to be organized can be helpful.
Goal though, Daniel, that I would need my help from my gen ed teachers because my students get a planner and they're supposed to be writing down their assignments in each class. And when they have 5 different classes a day, how do you get the gen ed teachers to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is one of the challenges, right, in middle school and high school, right, is that you write your IEP goal and you're like, we're going to do it, but then you have a team. But again, it's your job to communicate, like,
Right.
hey, this is part of the IEP goal. It's our legal document. You're gonna check this, and sometimes the teachers may need a checklist, and you may need to send it out to them and be like, hey, we're doing this. Like we gotta measure our data. Stacy needs to have her binder check. And guess what? She's not going to be the only one. So, making it sort of universal that we're checking those students or checking your caseload will be helpful. And I think that, yes, it does take some sort of coordination to say, hey, well, I'm the case manager here. These are the goals for her. It's an organizational goal. It's got to be in her planner. Someone's going to check it at either at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, whatever it is, and make sure each part of it's in there, and they may need to be reminded. But that's
an important goal.
What's that?
I feel that this is an important goal needed for high school.
I mean, I kind of feel like, I kind of feel like this is one of the big ones in high school, right? That the students just don't have, and they need it for life, right? How to organize themselves, plan, just be organized. And Tara's saying like create a shared Google Doc or even a Google Sheet, right? Where you're like, hey, we're checking this every time.
That's a check-in and check-out and a Google Doc. You're right. That would be.
I mean, it could be just simple, and like again, the teachers aren't above having executive functioning challenges too. We all are, right? And so we're going to forget. We may not be that organized ourselves, right? And so you may need to remind them. I mean, we all know which teachers or which your colleagues are super organized and which ones are like kind of like they may have lost that. That's honest. That's okay. Again, when we're talking about high schoolers, and I think this goes back to the self-monitoring chart, is teaching them, and Tara said it too, teach them how to use it and then fading back so that they can do it on their own. And students at high school level, and middle school even too, you can talk to them about executive functioning skills. And there's an executive functioning like training that's for teenagers that I didn't put in the Padlet, but maybe I should have. It's just
I'm a middle school teacher. My job is to prepare my students for high school.
Yeah, middle school too, but you can talk to them about executive functioning in middle school. and they'll understand it because like it's, you know, it's cognitive, you know, it's how their brain is sort of their brain is still working. When you're in high school, you're not 25, right? Your brain is still developing, you know, your frontal lobe is still developing, those executive functioning skills are still developing. And so like, we need to talk about it, and that like, we need to like any sort of muscle, you got to work it. Otherwise it's not going to develop. And it is our job to sort of talk to them about it.
I agree.
Someone, even elementary, someone is saying, asking about, for high schoolers, can you use grades or as baseline or attendance data for students who have attendance goals? Yeah, I mean, if you have attendance goals, then attendance data is your data. Grades, I would talk to what your school is doing. I don't often see grades, but I'm not, you guys could discuss that. I don't attend goals. Sometimes that's something where our app services will be helpful at home. I don't have control over time. Yeah, instead I measure something to do perceive. Yeah, I'd also read to the answer if that's in the chat, because that's probably better than mine. Sheet that students pick up weekly. Sure. Yeah, again, in middle school and high school, I think that you got to embed like the IEP goal communication across all the classes, which is hard. I'm not denying that that's been hard. It's 2:30. If you guys have questions, I was going to talk a little bit about math. Sort of same thing with math. It's going to be the mathematical practices, and there's 8 mathematical practices. So again, we're just going to be looking at those terms and using those terms to sort of write the math goals. It's in there. You guys can read that for yourself. If you guys have questions, can you guys, the main thing for me would be to control click this link, and you guys will fill out a little evaluation and then get your certificate. So just sort of like control click that thing. Let me see if that works for me. Whoops. Doesn't work for me. So, oh, it does work. Do you guys see it? So yeah, so if you guys, let me go back. So actually,
Get it.
you can get it.
Are you able to copy it and put it into the chat?
Yeah, I'll do that for you guys. I guess I can.
Thank you. I couldn't get on through the computer, so I'm on my phone.
Oh, you're good. Try that. See if that works. Oh, whoops. Try that again. There it is. Because I let me see. Let me know if that works. That should work. So yeah, thanks for coming. Sweet. Make sure you guys, everyone should come to Tara's training tomorrow, because it seems like data collection is a hot topic. So check that one out tomorrow. I'll be there as well. And there's the secondary transition one is also happening on Friday. And then please come to any other of our trainings you wish. And if you guys have questions, I'll just open it. I know just in terms of time, I wanted to stop and make sure you guys had time to ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions now. If not, fill out the evaluation, and thank you all for coming. And so yeah, once you finish the evaluation, it'll prompt you to get the certificate, and then you can fill your name in. And I don't know if you guys need CEUs or whatever it is. But thanks for coming, and thanks for my colleagues for showing up and helping me when I was drowning.
Thank you, Daniel. This was a wonderful class.
Thanks. Glad you enjoyed it.
I'll be at your March 22nd training also.
Is that, what am I doing? Executive functioning?
Executive functioning.
What I'm doing. Where I am. Tell me. Oh yeah. I think that unfortunately I think that's going to be just Natalie, which is going to be even better.
Okay.
I have to do something, but yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot. It's going to be great. But yeah, please come. 24th, I think I'm doing dyslexia too. If you want that.
Oh, I want to do that one too, because I have 3 dyslexic students.
Yeah, come on.
I need help on that one.
get in there. Yeah, so
Thank
that's like,
you.
yeah, so yeah.
And then just asking, because I want that dyslexia one too, but I'm not sure on
The dyslexia
school
one's
schedule.
so April, the dyslexia one's on the 24th, I think. I'm probably doing it again. But also like if you just send me if you can't make it,
Okay.
just send me an email. I put my email in the chat, and I'll send you a video present of me doing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect, because I have kids that are dyslexic, but then on top of that, students that are dyslexic, and where I might be going next year, I was trained on their dyslexia training.
Mhm.
So I know that was one thing that they talked about. If they bring me back to campus, they might be utilizing me there. So definitely thinking ahead, if I'm going back to that campus, I definitely want to be, jumpstart.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, just if you can't make it on the 24th,
Okay.
just email me and I'll send you the copy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Linda, Tara just put the link in the chat there. All right, y'all. Any other question, comment, concerns? Thank you for filling out the evals. Appreciate all of you for coming and for really being an attentive group. I appreciate that, for talking and sharing your questions. All right, without further ado, I'm going to end this thing before it gets real awkward.